I'm wondering, let me step sideways for a moment and then we'll return to our discussion about Venezuela and South America in general. I don't think it's really appropriate now to conceptualize what's happening around the world, but particularly in the West, in political terms precisely, because it's something deeper than what's merely political. And one of the ideas I've been toying with, I'd like your opinion about it, is that the default human moral stance is probably left-wing. Ben Shapiro said something to me at one point, just off the cuff, that tangled its way into my thinking, and I suppose is one of the motivations for this idea that he said he's a communist in his family. And so, if you have a family, if you have children, you're really hoping for something like, at least a part of you is hoping, especially when they're kids, for something like equality of outcome. You want everyone to do well. You're willing to intervene on the side of the person who's, who's not quite as successful at any given moment. You want to distribute resources as equitably as possible. Your interaction with your children and your wife is based on essentially an ethos of care. But, if you look at organizations that move beyond the scope of the family in size, that ethos of care and equitable care, let's say, doesn't scale well. And modern civilizations are not families. And here's some proof of that from the psychological perspective. So the personality trait agreeableness is associated with maternal care, let's say. It's the dimension of empathic, self-sacrificial care. And women are substantially higher in trait agreeableness across the world than men. What predicts success in a complex society on the personality side isn't agreeableness. In fact, managers who are more agreeable do worse because people take advantage of them. What predicts success on the personality side in a large-scale society is conscientiousness. And conscientiousness is dutifulness and industriousness and orderliness. And it's the ethos of hard work. It's a meritocratic ethos. And it's a cold virtue. Like, to be conscientious isn't the same as to be emotionally caring. And so I wonder if part of the reason that the politics of the left, so to speak, constantly mutate and transform, they're immune to criticism, say, by reference to history. You can't just say, well, every communist regime in the 20th century was a brutal, bloody, dictatorial disaster. It doesn't hold water. Maybe it doesn't hold water because it's actually extremely difficult to socialize people so that they can take their place in a complex society without defaulting to the underlying ethos of familial care. And so if you're a harsh and discriminating person, if you're very meritocratically oriented, if you say to someone, I don't give a damn about your feelings, it matters what sort of job you do, you're a harsh voice, and you might be a necessary voice to keep civilization itself running, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily an attractive voice, especially to people who think instinctively in terms of an ethos of care. And it's very, very easy to appeal to that. And so I think part of the problem, and then you might add to that another problem. So imagine that if you're driven by necessity when times are hard, it becomes obvious that those who can should be allowed to do, or should be pushed forward to do, that the meritocratic have to rise to the top because otherwise disaster looms. If you've been in a situation where economic security has been granted to you in some ways effortlessly for several generations even, it's also perhaps much easier to default to that ethos of care and to attend to the outliers in society who haven't served themselves well, but also perhaps haven't been served well by the conscientious ethos. And so I'm wondering about your thoughts of that, because we usually think about this, well, some people have left-wing beliefs and some people have right-wing beliefs, and that's the battlefield. It's like, I don't think that's a good level of analysis, because I don't exactly think this is about ideas. I think the default human position might be equality of outcome in small groups, and that you have to struggle against that mightily with your education system, maybe your moral system as a whole, to impose a meritocratic, like a cold virtue meritocracy on top of that.